The morning shift at the Galactic Council's Deep Space Monitoring Station began like any other. Technician X9 was reviewing routine communication intercepts when the alarm system suddenly activated. The main display screen flickered to life, showing energy readings that made no sense. At exactly 0347 Standard Galactic Time, every receiver in the Kepler 442 station picked up the same transmission. It came from a small blue planet in the outer rim of the galaxy, a world the Council had catalogued as Earth decades ago. The inhabitants were called humans, and everyone considered them harmless. The message was short and simple, broadcast on every frequency at once. When the translation computers finished their work, 7 words appeared on the screen that would change everything. This is Earth. We declare total annihilation. Council Overseer Vexra was drinking his morning stimulant when the emergency alert reached his office. As one of the most experienced members of the Talaxian species, he had seen many threats over his long career. Wars between planets, space pirates, even rogue artificial intelligences. But nothing had ever made his hands shake like this simple message from Earth. Humans were supposed to be primitive. Their fastest ships could barely reach the speed of light. Their weapons were crude metal projectiles. Their society was divided into hundreds of small nations that fought each other constantly. The Council had been watching them for 50 years, waiting for them to develop enough technology to make first contact. They were decades away from being ready to join galactic civilization, or so everyone thought. Vexra called up the detailed sensor reports from the Sol system, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The readings showed massive energy signatures scattered throughout human space. There were artificial structures in their asteroid belt that hadn't been there a year ago. Industrial operations on a scale that suggested weapons manufacturing. Gravity distortions that could only come from advanced technology. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities. Within an hour, every major power in the galaxy knew about the transmission. Commander Drex of the Imperial Defense Corps was in an emergency meeting with his senior officers. The Hegemony War Council was being assembled. The Trade Federation's security forces were put on high alert. "How is this possible?" Drex asked his intelligence chief. "Our last reports showed them testing primitive rocket engines. Now they're threatening total annihilation." The intelligence officer, a nervous Rillan named Keck-7, pulled up holographic displays showing human development over the past decades. "Sir, we may have been watching decoys. These new sensor readings suggest they've been building weapons platforms throughout their system. The energy output alone indicates technology we don't understand." Drex studied the reports carefully. Humans were known for their creativity and adaptability. During their brief history, they had gone from primitive hunters to space travel in just a few thousand years. Other species took millions of years to achieve the same progress. If humans had somehow made another technological leap in secret, the implications were terrifying. The psychological profiles made it worse. Humans were the only known species that seemed to enjoy conflict. They had been fighting wars constantly throughout their recorded history. They showed remarkable persistence in the face of overwhelming odds. Most disturbing of all, they appeared willing to sacrifice themselves to defeat enemies, something most galactic species found incomprehensible. News of the transmission spread through the galaxy's communication networks within hours. Emergency sessions were called in government buildings across 12 star systems. Military commanders reviewed defensive positions. Weapons manufacturers received urgent orders for increased production. The 3 major galactic powers each reached the same conclusion independently. If humans were confident enough to broadcast a threat of total annihilation across the galaxy, they must have the weapons to back it up. No species would make such a bold statement unless they were absolutely certain of their military superiority. Admiral Tix of the Valorian Defense Fleet immediately began repositioning battle groups around their most important worlds. The hegemony recalled 3 expedition fleets from expansion zones to form defensive perimeters. Even the usually peaceful trade federations started moving warships to protect their commercial centers. By the end of the day, the galaxy's military balance had completely shifted. Ships that had been exploring new systems were rushing home. Planned invasions of weaker species were cancelled. Defense budgets were increased across hundreds of worlds. The irony was lost on the military planners. In their rush to prepare for human aggression, they were voluntarily giving up strategic positions they had spent years securing. They were pulling resources away from profitable operations to defend against an enemy that might not even be capable of reaching their territory. But fear had taken hold, and fear made even the most logical beings act irrationally. The transmission from Earth had lasted only 30 seconds, but it had accomplished something no military campaign had ever achieved. It made the galaxy's most powerful civilizations abandon their expansion plans and retreat to defensive positions. As reports continued to arrive throughout the day, one thing became clear to every military analyst studying the situation. The humans had somehow transformed from a primitive, divided species into a threat capable of challenging the established galactic order. The only question now was what they planned to do with their newfound power. In command centers across the galaxy, military leaders prepared for the worst, while hoping they had misunderstood the message from the small blue planet in the outer rim. 3 kilometers beneath the surface of the moon, Admiral Li Hun walked through corridors that officially did not exist. The hidden command center had been built over 20 years, carved out of solid rock, and shielded from every type of sensor the galaxy's advanced civilizations might use. Today, it housed the most important military operation in human history. Heian stopped at the main display screen, which showed a 3-dimensional map of the entire solar system. Scattered throughout space were dozens of bright dots, each representing what alien sensors would detect as massive military installations. To any outside observer, humanity had somehow built an enormous war machine in complete secrecy. The truth was far different, and far more desperate. "Status report," Hyun said to the room full of technicians and scientists working at computer terminals. Dr. Kim Jun looked up from his workstation, his face tired but excited. As the chief scientist of Project Mirror, he had spent the last 5 years perfecting the most elaborate deception in human history. "All ghost protocols are running perfectly, Admiral. The holographic projectors are broadcasting energy signatures that match heavy weapons platforms. The alien monitoring stations are detecting exactly what we want them to see." Heian nodded, then walked to another screen showing intercepted alien communications. The messages were pouring in from across the galaxy, and every single one confirmed that their plan was working better than they had dared to hope. "They're completely convinced," said Colonel Parkman, who was analyzing the intelligence reports. "The Valorian Empire just recalled their 3rd fleet from the Andromeda expansion. The hegemony cancelled their planned invasion of the Wriggle system. Even the Trade Federation is moving warships to defensive positions. The plan had begun 53 years ago with humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. It had not been the peaceful meeting that science fiction writers had imagined. Instead, it came through intercepted communications that revealed Earth was on a list of worlds scheduled for resource extraction. Once the population reached optimal levels for efficient harvesting, rather than panic or attempt futile resistance. Humanity's leaders had chosen a different path. If they could not match the aliens' technology, they would use humanity's greatest strength, the ability to deceive and manipulate. Dr. Kim Jun had led the technical side of the operation. "The beauty of it," he explained to Hyun, as they watched alien fleet movements on the display, "is that we're not actually lying about having powerful weapons. We're just using their own assumptions against them. The installations that alien sensors detected were real, but they were not weapons. They were massive holographic projectors powered by fusion reactors, creating false energy signatures that perfectly matched the type of readings heavy military equipment would produce. The projectors had been built using technology reverse-engineered from alien artifacts recovered from crashed scout ships over the decades. The industrial operations in the asteroid belt were equally clever. Automated mining drones, originally designed for legitimate resource extraction, had been reprogrammed to move in patterns that suggested large-scale weapons manufacturing. They would gather at specific points, perform coordinated movements that looked like construction work, then disperse in ways that mimicked the deployment of finished military hardware. Colonel Parkman pulled up a detailed analysis of alien reactions to their deception. "The psychological impact has exceeded all projections," she reported. "They're not just treating us as a potential threat. They're treating us as an existential danger to galactic civilization." The key to the plan's success lay in understanding alien psychology. Most galactic species had evolved as prey animals or had become peaceful through millions of years of stable civilization. The concept of a species that would threaten total annihilation was so foreign to their thinking that they assumed humans must possess incredibly advanced weapons to make such a bold statement. Hune studied the intelligence reports with satisfaction. Every major power in the galaxy was now focused on defending against humanity rather than expanding their own territory. Resources that had been devoted to conquest were being redirected to defensive preparations. Military units that had been attacking weaker species were being recalled to protect core worlds. "The irony," Heian said to her staff, "is that by pretending to be a galactic threat, we've actually made the galaxy more peaceful. Species that were being invaded last month are now safe because their attackers are too worried about us to continue their campaigns." Dr. Kim Jun brought up another display, showing the construction timeline for humanity's real military capabilities. "The deception has bought us exactly what we needed most: time. While they're preparing for our fake superweapons, we're building actual defenses. In another 10 years, we might not need the holographic projectors anymore." The command center buzzed with quiet activity as technicians monitored alien communications and adjusted the holographic projections to maintain the illusion. Everyone in the room understood that they were participating in the most audacious bluff in human history. Admiral Lee Heian looked at the display showing panicked alien fleet movements and allowed herself a rare moment of pride. Humanity had faced extinction and responded not with weapons or violence, but with creativity and deception. They had turned their greatest weakness, technological inferiority, to their greatest strength by making their enemies afraid of. "Shadows, keep monitoring their communications," she ordered, "and make sure our ghost installations keep broadcasting. The longer they believe we're dangerous, the safer Earth becomes." The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular chamber, their voices rising in panic and anger as they tried to make sense of the terrifying message from Earth. The emergency session had been called within hours of receiving the human transmission, but instead of calm deliberation, fear had taken control. War Prime Nex of the Imperial Hegemony stood at his speaking platform, his massive form trembling with rage. "The humans must be destroyed immediately," he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We should strike now, while they are still trapped in their home system. Every moment we wait makes them stronger." "And what if that is exactly what they want us to do?" interrupted Scholar Priest Vel from across the room. The elderly diplomat's calm voice cut through the noise like a blade. "What if they are prepared for such an attack? Their message suggests they are ready for war." Council Overseer Rexka tried to restore order by activating the central speaking platform, but the representatives continued arguing among themselves. Fear had spread through the chamber like a disease, making rational discussion impossible. The intelligence reports being shared made the situation worse with each new detail. Human technology had apparently advanced by centuries in just a few decades. The energy signatures detected in their solar system suggested weapons that could threaten entire star systems. Most disturbing of all were the psychological profiles that painted humans as a species uniquely suited for warfare. "Look at their history," said military analyst Keck 7. projecting holographic images above the chamber. They have been fighting wars continuously for thousands of years. They show remarkable creativity in developing new weapons. They display persistence that borders on madness, and they appear willing to sacrifice themselves to defeat enemies. Ambassador Dell of the Trade Federation raised a different concern that sent new waves of panic through the assembly. What if this is not about conquest at all? What if they are demanding tribute, resources, territory? The economic impact could destroy our entire trading network. The debate grew more heated as each species considered how the human threat might affect their own interests. The Valorian Empire worried about their expansion programs. The hegemony feared losing their military dominance. The Trade Federation calculated the cost of disrupted commerce routes, while the politicians argued. Military commanders across the galaxy were already taking action. Admiral Tex of the Valorian Defense Fleet had activated emergency protocols within minutes of receiving the intelligence briefing. 3 battle groups that had been exploring new systems were ordered to return immediately to defend core worlds. We cannot afford to underestimate them, Tex told his senior officers during an emergency strategy meeting. Any species confident enough to threaten the entire galaxy must have weapons we cannot imagine. We must assume they can back up their threat. The response was swift and massive. Weapons factories across dozens of worlds received urgent orders to increase production. Ancient defense treaties that had not been used for centuries were suddenly activated. Military units that had been fighting expansion wars were recalled too. Defensive positions. The hegemony's war planners presented their analysis to government leaders in a classified briefing. The humans have somehow achieved a technological breakthrough that puts them centuries ahead of our previous estimates, reported Strategic Commander X9. Their willingness to broadcast such a bold threat suggests they possess weapons beyond our current understanding. On worlds throughout the galaxy, civilian populations watched news broadcasts showing military fleets rushing to defensive positions. Stock markets crashed as investors realized that profitable expansion operations were being abandoned. Trade routes that had operated safely for decades were suddenly considered too dangerous to use. The irony of the situation was lost on most of the panicking leaders. In their desperate rush to prepare for human aggression, they were voluntarily giving up strategic advantages they had spent years building. Profitable mining operations in distant systems were abandoned. Weak species that had been marked for conquest were suddenly left alone as their attackers rushed home to defend against the human threat. But fear made even the most logical beings act irrationally. The possibility that humans might actually be capable of total annihilation was so terrifying that no one wanted to take chances. Better to overreact and waste resources than to underestimate the threat and face destruction. Meanwhile, hidden monitoring stations at the edge of human space recorded every ship movement, every communication, every sign of the massive military response their single transmission had triggered. The alien fleets rushing to defensive positions, the weapons being manufactured in panic, the strategic positions being abandoned. All of it represented a victory for humanity's desperate gamble. The greatest military powers in the galaxy were retreating from their expansion plans, not because of any actual human military action, but because of 7 simple words broadcast on all frequencies. The message had lasted 30 seconds, but its effects were reshaping the political balance of 12 star systems in command centers across hundreds of worlds. Military leaders studied intelligence reports about human capabilities and prepared for a war that might never come. They had no way of knowing that their massive defensive preparations were exactly what the humans had hoped to achieve. Fear had become humanity's most powerful weapon, and it was more effective than any actual military technology they possessed. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since humanity's bold transmission, and the hidden lunar command center buzzed with activity as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Dr. Kim Jun walked through the corridors with a mixture of pride and worry etched on his face. The holographic deception had worked beyond their wildest dreams, but success was bringing unexpected problems. Admiral Lee Hyun was reviewing intelligence reports when June entered her office. The walls displayed star charts showing the massive redeployment of alien forces, all because of humanity's clever bluff. But the latest reports suggested their deception might be unraveling in dangerous ways. "Give me the full situation report," Haeon said, without looking up from her data screens. June activated a holographic display showing galactic military movements over the past 6 months. "The good news is that our plan worked perfectly. The major powers have spent incredible amounts of money and resources preparing for our non-existent superweapons. The Valorian Empire alone has built 50 new defensive stations. The hegemony has tripled their weapons production." Haeon nodded, but she could hear the concern in June's voice. "And the bad news? The massive military redeployment has created problems we didn't expect," June continued, switching to a different display. "When the big powers pulled their fleets back to defend their core worlds, they left power vacuums everywhere. Smaller species that were being oppressed are now rebelling. Trade routes that were protected by military patrols are being attacked by pirates. The galaxy is becoming more unstable, not more peaceful." The reports painted a complex picture. While the major military powers cowered behind defensive lines, dozens of smaller conflicts had erupted across the galaxy. Species that had been living under alien occupation were declaring independence. Pirates and raiders were taking advantage of unprotected shipping lanes. The careful balance of galactic civilization was falling apart. Worse, June added, some of the more aggressive species are starting to ask uncomfortable questions. They want to know why everyone is so afraid of a technologically inferior species from the Outer Rim. As if to prove his point, an urgent communication alert sounded in the command center. The duty officer's voice came over the intercom. "Admiral, we have hostile contacts approaching the outer system. 3 Raider clan ships heading directly for Earth." Hyun and June rushed to the main command center, where screens showed the approaching alien vessels. The Raiders were a nomadic warrior culture, known for testing the strength of other species. They had apparently decided to probe human defenses directly. Captain Cho Bin of the patrol vessel Defiance was the first to intercept the alien ships. Her small vessel was barely 100 meters long, equipped with primitive weapons that would be useless against advanced alien technology. The lead raider ship was a massive battle cruiser that could destroy her vessel with a single shot. "Unknown vessels. This is Captain Chobin of the Earth Defense Force," she transmitted on all frequencies. "You are entering restricted space. Withdraw immediately or face total annihilation." The alien commander's response came back filled with contempt. "Primitive humans, we have come to test your strength. Your ship is pathetic. Surrender now, and we will grant you a quick death." In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Hyan watched the confrontation with growing dread. The raider ship was powering up weapons that could vaporize the Defiance instantly. Their bluff was about to be exposed in the most dangerous way possible. Captain Chobin had seconds to make a decision that would determine humanity's fate. She could try to run, but her ship was too slow to escape. She could surrender, but that would reveal human weakness to the galaxy. Or she could do something that no alien commander would expect from a technologically inferior species. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed," Cho announced to her crew of 12. "We're going to show these aliens what humans are really made of." The raider commander was so surprised by the human response that he hesitated for a crucial moment. Instead of firing immediately, he waited to see what the small human ship would do. It was the last mistake he would ever make. The Defiance accelerated to maximum speed and crashed directly into the alien battlecruiser. Both ships were destroyed instantly in a massive explosion that could be seen from planets several systems away. The other two raider vessels fled immediately, carrying news of the encounter back to their clans. Within days, the story had spread throughout the galaxy. The debris field told a clear tale. When faced with impossible odds, humans had chosen mutual destruction rather than surrender. The psychological impact was devastating to alien morale across dozens of species. Other groups tried to test human resolve over the following weeks, but they encountered the same suicidal determination. Human patrol ships would ram enemy vessels rather than retreat. Defense stations would self-destruct rather than be captured. Even civilian vessels would fight to the death against overwhelming odds. The galaxy began to understand that humanity's greatest weapon was not advanced technology or superior numbers. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat under any circumstances. This realization was more terrifying to most alien species than any superweapon could have been. Military analysts across the galaxy updated their assessments of human capabilities. The species that had seemed technologically inferior was revealed to possess something far more dangerous, a willingness to die fighting that made victory against them impossibly costly, even for superior forces. Fear of humanity evolved from fear of their weapons to fear of their psychology, and that fear would prove to be even more effective than the original deception. 2 years had passed since the transmission that shook the galaxy, and Admiral Lee Hayen walked through the same lunar command center that had once been humanity's last desperate hope. The walls that had once displayed emergency battle plans now showed diplomatic communications from across the known universe. The change was so complete that it seemed like a different world entirely. The morning briefing brought news that would have seemed impossible just 24 months earlier. Colonel Park Min stood at the central display, reading from a list of communications that grew longer each day. "Status report," Hayen requested, settling into her command chair. "The Valorian Empire has formally proposed a mutual defense treaty," Parkman began, her voice still carrying a note of disbelief. "The trade hegemony is requesting permission to establish a commercial station in our outer asteroid belt, and the Galactic Council has extended an invitation for Earth to join as a full member with Security Council privileges." Hayen shook her head in amazement. 2 years ago, these same powers had been preparing to attack or defend against humanity. Now they were competing to become Earth's allies and trading partners. Dr. Kim Jun approached with his daily intelligence summary, but his expression was far different from the worried scientist who had once managed humanity's desperate deception. "The transformation continues to accelerate," he reported. "Yesterday, we received formal requests for alliance from 6 more species. 3 others are asking for human military advisors to help with their own defense planning." The change had not come through military conquest or technological superiority. Instead, it had grown from something far more powerful: respect born from fear, and fear born from understanding. The galaxy had learned that humans possessed something more dangerous than any weapon: the absolute refusal to surrender, no matter how hopeless the situation became. The turning point had been Captain Chobin's sacrifice and the dozens of similar incidents that followed. Each time alien forces tested human resolve, they encountered the same suicidal determination. Human ships that could not win would ram their enemies. Defense stations facing capture would self-destruct. Even civilian vessels would fight to the death rather than surrender. "The psychological impact has been extraordinary," Dr. Kim Jun explained as he pulled up analysis reports. "Species that have spent millions of years avoiding conflict now understand that fighting humans means accepting massive casualties even in victory. Most have decided that cooperation is far more profitable than confrontation." The intelligence reports told a remarkable story. Aggressive species that had been expanding their territories through conquest were now seeking diplomatic solutions to their conflicts. They knew that military action might draw human attention, and no one wanted to face opponents who would choose mutual destruction over defeat. Even more surprising was how other species had begun adopting human tactics. The Regelian Defense Force had started training their pilots in ramming techniques. The Centauri Republic had built self-destruct systems into their space stations. The human approach to warfare was spreading throughout the galaxy. Admiral Hyun walked to the communication center, where dozens of requests waited for her attention. The messages came from every corner of known space. Small species that had been bullied by larger powers were asking for human protection. Major civilizations were proposing joint research projects and trade agreements. Former enemies were suggesting cooperation on mutual defense. "Look at this one," Colonel Parkman said, highlighting a particularly interesting message. "The hegemony wants to hire human military consultants to help plan their border defenses. They're offering to pay us with advanced technology and resource rights." The irony was not lost on any of them. The same military powers that had once considered humans primitive were now asking to learn from human strategic thinking. The species that had planned to harvest Earth's resources were now offering their own technology in exchange for friendship. "The most remarkable part," Dr. Kim Jun observed, "is how peaceful the galaxy has become. Major wars have practically disappeared because everyone knows that conflict might eventually involve humans. The threat of total commitment warfare has made diplomatic solutions much more attractive." Hyun reviewed the weekly reports showing galactic conflict statistics. In the 2 years since humanity's transmission, large-scale wars had decreased by 80%. Territorial disputes were being resolved through negotiation rather than invasion. Even piracy had declined as criminal organizations decided that the risk of human retaliation was too high. The transformation extended beyond military matters. Human cultural exports were becoming popular throughout the galaxy. Alien species were fascinated by human art, literature, and philosophy that celebrated the individual's willingness to fight impossible odds. Human concepts of honor, sacrifice, and determination were being studied in universities across hundreds of worlds. "We've received another interesting proposal," Parkman reported, showing Heian a communication from the Galactic Archaeological Society. "They want human volunteers to explore dangerous ancient ruins that other species consider too risky. They believe our unique psychological profile makes us ideal for hazardous exploration." Admiral Lee Heian looked around the command center that had once been hidden beneath the lunar surface in desperate secrecy. Now it served as humanity's diplomatic headquarters, processing alliance requests and coordinating peaceful cooperation with species across the galaxy. The transmission that had begun as a desperate bluff had achieved something remarkable. Instead of bringing the destruction that everyone feared, it had created the most peaceful period in galactic history. Humanity had earned their place among the stars, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the demonstration of something more powerful than any weapon: the courage to risk everything for their beliefs, and the refusal to surrender even against impossible odds.